Namaste everybody, Lisa Romano here, the Breakthrough Life Coach, and today we're going to talk about what we can do when we are suddenly faced with tremendous anxiety that we were not aware of before when we were catering to a narcissist and we've suddenly stopped catering to a narcissist. So I know from my own life and from my professional life, coaching so many people, that when we start to take care of ourselves and we stop catering to other people, in some cases we can all of a sudden be hit with tremendous anxiety. And it can be very, very maddening and very confusing. So let me read you this letter that I received from a YouTube viewer. She writes, "Dear Lisa, I am 60 years old and just realizing I have been abused by narcissistic parents my whole life. I am breaking free of this dynamic, but I am suddenly dealing with so much anxiety. My parents are in their 80s and I have stopped catering to them. Is it possible that because I have less to worry about, for example, their Sunday meals I had to attend, their triangulation, their scapegoating and such? I mean, I have excluded myself from their lives to a great deal. And now that I am not tiptoeing on eggshells, I am suddenly feeling panic. What's going on? Can you help me figure this out? Love, Estelle." So Estelle, when you have been raised by narcissistic parents and someone like you who has gone 60 years unaware as to the narcissistic dynamic in your home, it can be quite troubling to wake up and realize that you have been in an abusive, narcissistic relationship with your parents. It can be very troubling and confusing. But at the same time, it can start to make a whole lot of sense. Suddenly, you understand scapegoating. Suddenly, you understand, that's gaslighting. Suddenly, you understand passive-aggressive personalities. Suddenly, you understand the two-faced mom or dad that you have. Suddenly, addictions make sense. Suddenly, distractions make sense. So as confusing as it is, it can also be, exciting to finally realize it's not you, it's just your experiences or your environment or your programming. And yes, absolutely, I have found that when we begin to let go of narcissistic parents, narcissistic spouses, narcissistic siblings, whatever, when we start to deal with our own codependency, when we acknowledge that we have been codependent upon other people, meaning that we worried more about what other people thought about us than what we thought about ourselves, when we acknowledge that codependency has caused this need in us to be needed by the people in our lives, and we begin to realize that we had no idea what it felt like to feel seen and to feel valued. We didn't even realize that our narcissistic parents were hanging their validation and their love in front of us like a carrot, and that we, under the guise of codependency, below the veil of consciousness, as I like to say, because all men are asleep and unaware, they are unaware until they have that magical moment where they say, I can think about the way that I think. How am I being treated? Whoa, how do I feel about my narcissistic mom? Or how do I feel about what my mom just said? I remember the day that I said that to myself. I was 36 years old. My mom said something horrible to me on my birthday, and I just stopped for a moment. I put my head down and I asked my heart, how do you feel? And I started to cry because I was acknowledging myself. And I was acknowledging this faulty, dysfunctional, narcissistic, codependent dynamic that I had lived with for my entire life. And so what happened, however, is as I began to confront my codependency, absolutely, Estelle, what began to happen was I started to experience panic, but in an odd way, like it would come out of nowhere. And I think this is what happens. I think that when we have distractions, these distractions are very beneficial, because when you have all this angst and anxiety that you're pushing down because you don't know how to process an emotion, right? I mean, if you've been raised by a narcissistic mother, you don't know how to process an emotion because you were never allowed to have an emotion. It was never your right to feel anything. You were programmed to worry about what she thought or what your narcissistic dad thought. You were irrelevant. Your experience was irrelevant. This is emotional abuse to the max. This is psychological abuse to the max. Being born and then being made to feel invisible, being treated with indifference, and then being taught that you exist to please other people. It's maddening. And when you go through a lifetime of feeling like you have to suppress and push and deny your feelings, what ends up happening is you have to develop enough distractions outside of you that are going to be able to help you hold down and suppress the anxiety inside of you. So I drew you a diagram. So, you know, I love my diagrams. So I just hope that you guys are able to see this. I'll try to make it so you can. So, oops, there go my glasses. So this represents, I used this diagram recently with a couple of clients, and they really, really responded to it well. So imagine that this is a hole in your backyard, okay? Just imagine. And imagine that you have, I know it sounds kind of gross, but imagine that you have 3 people in this hole. And this hole, that's Alice shaking it off. This hole represents your body's cells or your subconscious mind. And these people represent your anxiety that you're not letting out of the bed. The anxiety that you're suppressing because you've been taught that your feelings don't matter. And so year after year after year after year, day after day, you're suppressing your emotions, right? So imagine that this hole in your backyard is just getting dumped and filled up with people. So for argument's sake, I'm going to make it nice and easy. Let's say you have 3 people in that hole. If you wanted to keep people in that hole, right, and you didn't want them to get out, you would have to have 3 to 4 people of equal weight, of equal mass, and of equal strength, standing on some type of a board, okay, or a veil, standing on some type of a board outside of this hole in order to keep these emotions or these people in the hole or inside of you. So all of these people represent distractions, right? So they represent sometimes addiction. When we have a lot of pain inside of us, we can become addicted. We can become love addicts. We can become alcoholics. We can become pill poppers. We can become addicted to porn. We can become shopaholics, workaholics, sexaholics. So we can develop all these distractions, and these distractions cause enough anxiety in our lives that they equal the anxiety that we're trying to suppress, ignore, and we don't know how to deal with. Just hear me. Now, when you start to remove the veil, or in this case, let's say we have this big, thick piece of plywood that's keeping the people in this hole. So let's say one day, somebody gets sick and he jumps off the plywood. So now these people down here are able to push this plywood. So let's say another person gets sick, he gets knocked off, and he gets knocked off, and he gets knocked off. And let's say you are now ready, you have decided, I'm not dealing with all these distractions anymore. I don't want to be addicted anymore. I want to go into treatment. Or I don't want to live in a narcissistically abusive relationship anymore. I want a divorce. Or I don't want to deal with my narcissistic mother and father anymore. I'm not going there anymore. I'm going no contact. So when we eliminate all these distractions, guess what happens? The anxiety that has been within us for so long begins to rise and bubble to the surface. And now all of a sudden, this anxiety that we have been suppressing for our lives begins to surface. And we don't know what to do with this sometimes. And in the past, when we were dealing with other people's stuff, or having to walk around on eggshells because we were afraid to rock the boat, when that was going on, we were distracted from the anxiety on the inside. So what I'm trying to say, dear ones, is that when you start to deal with your stuff, when you decide to divorce a narcissist or leave a narcissist, when you decide to deal with your codependency head on, when you decide to confront an addiction, when you decide to tell your truth. Sometimes what happens is all this anxiety that you've been keeping and squelching inside of you begins to bubble and rise to the surface. Now, what we have to do, and this is what I teach people how to do in my programs and in private coaching online and in my books, all over the place, if you listen. What I'm trying to help people do is learn how to stay in their bodies while their conscious mind processes an emotion that their default settings of their brains ordinarily flag as pain and wish to avoid. If you can learn to sit in your body and observe these emotions, and remember, energy and emotions are one and the same. So emotions are energy that are supposed to stay in motion. Energy is not supposed to get stuck. And this is the thing, energy never gets stuck. There is always quantum activity at a subatomic level, which means there's always this inside of us. There's always this energy that's inside of us. It might be contained because we're suppressing it, but those of us who have never learned how to heal a feeling or feel a feeling and perceive a feeling in a proper way, we are running from our feelings. Well, we think we are. We're really not running from anything. Everything is inside of us. We have to learn to stay in our bodies, to sit with our discomfort for longer periods of time, until we can emotionally and cognitively and consciously process emotions that have been stuck in our bodies for so long. So, dear Estelle, you are embarking on an amazing journey, and it's never too late. I also want to say that I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. Don't be put off that you're 60, because, I always think about, and I share this often, one of the greatest motivating factors I have for doing what I do is the possibility that somebody out there won't die like my mom. My mom is in a wheelchair. She is suffering from dementia. She's lived with my narcissistic dad for 54 years. She's been with him for 55 or 56 years. Like I said, dementia. And it's very sad to me to know that she never had a chance. She was raised by 2 alcoholic parents, never went into recovery, was a blind codependent her whole life. She became a complete people pleaser to my dad, and I believe that she lost her mind a long time ago and just handed it to him. Whatever he said, she was going along with. She feared him. She wanted to please him. That was her greatest desire in life, was to please this man and for him to need her. And so this idea that you're 60, it's okay, because you are going to, just embrace the rest of your life open-eyed and, in truth. And I think it's so much better for us to be in truth and to be afraid than to be in denial and in fear and not know what's wrong. So I am so happy that you were here. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. If you guys haven't yet, please consider subscribing. Join me, meditate with me in my group on Insight Timer. I'll leave the link below. Join me in my free Facebook group. And please, I also have a membership site for breakthrough warriors who absolutely want the tools that they can use to continue healing on this amazing journey of awakening. So namaste, dear ones. I bow to the love and the light that is absolutely in you. Bye for now.